Have you ever wondered if the struggles you've carried all your life, the restless thoughts that visit you in the quiet hours, the old disappointments that seem to return in different disguises, are more than random misfortunes? What if each moment of pain, each repeating pattern, was not a punishment, but a hidden invitation to grow beyond what you once believed yourself to be? There is an old Zen saying, "When the clouds vanish, the moon does not appear. It was always there." In the same way, your true nature has been shining quietly behind every shadow of suffering. You don't need to become someone else to find peace. You simply need to recognize the signs that your soul is finally free to come home to itself. Today, I'd like to share with you 7 subtle, almost secret signs that your karma, the old unseen threads of unfinished lessons, has begun to dissolve. These signs are not loud declarations or sudden miracles. Instead, they arrive like a soft hush in the middle of your day, a new ease you can't quite explain, a quiet knowing that you are no longer bound by the old stories that once defined you. As you listen, I invite you to set aside any need to judge or measure yourself. Simply breathe and see if you recognize even a flicker of these truths in your own life. Because when you do, you'll know the clouds have parted and the light was always waiting for you. Let us begin. Sign 1. Silence becomes a sanctuary. There is an old tale told beneath the banyan trees of an ancient monastery where the monks would gather at dawn, their saffron robes fluttering like soft lanterns in the morning breeze. Among them was an elderly monk named Sumantra, whose face carried the lines of many lifetimes. It was said he had wandered for decades across deserts and mountains, searching for the hidden jewel of truth. In his youth, he believed that wisdom was something to be chased down like a wild animal, that only by gathering more knowledge, more scriptures, more voices, he could finally quiet the restlessness that throbbed in his chest. So he traveled from teacher to teacher, collecting words as though they were charms that might finally hush the gnawing emptiness. Yet, no matter how many discourses he memorized, no matter how many debates he won, the silence of his own heart remained an unbearable wilderness. One day, after years of ceaseless seeking, Sumantra found himself in the small meditation hall at the edge of the forest. It was nothing remarkable, just a square room with a cracked clay floor and a single cushion worn thin by generations of sitting. He had come only because he was too weary to keep searching. As he lowered himself onto the cushion, he noticed that no one was there to instruct him. No voice was guiding him. No ritual was unfolding. The world outside had grown so quiet that he could hear the hush of the trees breathing through the open window. For the first time, he did not rush to fill the silence with recitation or thought. He simply sat. And in that sitting, so humble, so unceremonious, he felt something uncoil inside his chest. The silence, which for so long had felt like a void threatening to swallow him, began to soften. It was as if the emptiness was not empty at all, but a tender space holding the presence he had sought everywhere else. A warmth gathered at the center of his being, and he realized he was no longer afraid to be alone with himself. Later, when a young disciple asked what had happened in that moment, the old monk only smiled and said, "When you finally stop running from your own quiet, it will become the dearest companion you ever meet." You see, silence is not merely the absence of sound. It is the absence of the need to distract yourself. When karma still coils around the heart, silence feels like punishment, a reminder of everything unresolved, every regret, every grief we dare not face. But when karma begins to dissolve, silence becomes a sanctuary where the spirit can finally lay down its burdens. Have you ever noticed that when you sit alone, 1,000 restless thoughts leap up like startled birds? And yet, if you wait just a little longer than you think you can, those thoughts grow tired of flapping their wings. They drift away, and what remains is a presence as soft and steady as moonlight. Perhaps you too have spent long years filling every empty moment, turning on the television to drown out the ache, picking up the phone to keep from hearing the quiet murmur of your own soul. It is a very human thing to do, to fear what we do not yet understand. But what if the silence you have been avoiding is not emptiness at all, but a doorway? What if it is the gentle invitation to meet the part of you that is already whole? In the Dhammapada, the Buddha reminds us, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. But I wonder, might it be even better to sit in the wordless hush, where peace does not need to be spoken, because it is already alive within you? When the veil of karma thins, you no longer need to chase the noise to feel complete. You do not fear your own company. Instead, you begin to recognize the quiet as a teacher, more honest than any sermon, and more intimate than any companion. So I ask you now, as you listen to these words, when was the last time you allowed yourself to sit in stillness without trying to fix, to change, to solve? Can you remember a moment when you felt the hush of life itself holding you, asking nothing in return? If you can begin to find comfort there, if you can let silence become your refuge rather than your exile, you may already be walking the first steps beyond the old loops of karma. And in that discovery, you will find yourself ready for the second sign, which unfolds when the mind learns to witness instead of reacting. Sign 2. You observe instead of reacting. There is a story that the elder monks often whispered to young novices when they first arrived at the monastery, nervous, eager, their hearts still raw from the storms of the outside world. It was the story of Ajita, a monk known not for his eloquence or his scholarship, but for the peculiar stillness he carried wherever he went. They said that when Ajita walked through the village market, the merchants would stop arguing mid-sentence, their voices trailing into awkward hush, as though some invisible hand had pressed gently on their shoulders and reminded them to breathe. One morning, as Ajita swept the stone path that led from the temple gate to the garden, a traveler appeared, dirt-caked and scowling, carrying a bundle of anger he had been collecting for years. Without so much as a greeting, the man hurled insults at Ajita, accusing the monks of arrogance and greed. He spat bitter words, words sharp enough to wound any prideful heart. But Ajita did not lift his gaze from the broom in his hands. He swept another stroke, then another, each motion slow and deliberate. When the traveler paused to catch his breath, expecting a retort, Ajita finally looked up. His eyes were neither condemning nor submissive. They were simply clear. With a voice softer than the morning breeze, he said, "You have offered me your anger, but I do not have to accept it." The traveler stood dumbfounded, his face paling as if someone had gently removed the plank of rage he had balanced his life upon. He tried to stammer a reply, but none came, and in that quiet, he felt the first strange twinge of peace he had known in many seasons. This, dear friend, is the mark of a soul no longer bound by reflexive reaction. It is one of the most liberating signs that karma has begun to dissolve its hold. When the tethers of old wounds remain unhealed, every insult feels personal, every slight ignites a blaze of defensiveness, and every disappointment carves another groove into the well-worn pattern of grievance. We react not because the moment requires it, but because the echo of past hurts is still ringing in our chest. But when karma clears, something miraculous happens. The space between stimulus and response begins to widen. Instead of flinching at the first sign of criticism or scrambling to prove yourself, you notice a gentle pause arising inside you, a space large enough to hold your entire experience without judgment. In that space, you see that the other person's words are often nothing more than projections of their own unhealed sorrow. You realize that their anger is a cloak they wear to keep from feeling their own fear. Have you ever watched a small child throwing a tantrum, kicking and crying, convinced that the world is conspiring against them? In that moment, you don't hate the child. You understand that the storm will pass, and beneath it, there is an innocence untouched by the drama. The same is true for adults who hurl their bitterness like stones. When you begin to observe rather than react, you glimpse the frightened child beneath every angry face. The Buddha once said, "Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal rule." But sometimes, love is not an act of affection. Sometimes it is simply the refusal to add more fuel to the fire. When you choose not to react, you are not being weak or passive. You are standing in a place of clarity that karma can no longer manipulate. So I wonder, if you look back over the last months of your life, how many times did you feel the urge to defend yourself, to prove your worth, to explain your choices to those who could not see your heart? And how might it feel to let that urge dissolve, like a wave that crests and then returns quietly to the ocean? What freedom might you discover in that gentle surrender? In the monastery where Ajita once swept the path, they say that even after he passed into the beyond, the stones he tended still felt different, so smooth, so peaceful, that travelers who walked across them often paused, bewildered by a hush they could not name. Such is the power of non-reaction. It leaves traces more enduring than any argument ever could. And when you can watch life unfolding without clutching at every moment, without warring with every emotion, you will find yourself ready to step into the next sign, where the old painful patterns lose their power to return. Sign 3. Repeating patterns dissolve. Long before the great temples were raised and the scriptures were carved into palm leaves, there was a simple village nestled along the slow bend of a river. In that village lived a woman named Anaya, whose life, like so many lives, was woven with the same sorrow repeating itself in different disguises. From her youth she felt an ache she could not name, a yearning to be chosen, to be loved without condition. She married young, believing that devotion alone would shield her from abandonment. But as the years turned, each love she clung to slowly crumbled, until she found herself once again alone by the river, her heart heavy with the old familiar ache. Each time a new relationship began, she felt a thrill of hope that perhaps this time would be different. Yet, before long, the old doubts would creep in like shadows at dusk. Each time it ended, she blamed her unworthiness or cursed her fate. One evening, after yet another farewell that felt eerily similar to the last, she walked to the water's edge, carrying a small clay lantern. The wind was sharp, stinging her cheeks as she lit the tiny flame. She knelt in the sand and whispered, "What in me calls this to return again and again?" For a long time, there was no answer, only the quiet lap of water against the shore. But as she sat without demanding an explanation, she felt a small, tremulous awareness stirring beneath her grief, the understanding that the pattern was not simply punishment from the world outside, but a reflection of the wound she carried within. It is a curious thing, how karma repeats itself, not because the universe wishes to see us suffer, but because the lesson remains incomplete. Like an unlearned melody, it will rise again in a different key, played by new hands, until the heart finally understands the harmony it has resisted. Karma wears many masks. The friend who betrays you just as the last one did, the job that ends in disappointment, the old arguments that replay with eerie familiarity. Each time, we are tempted to believe it is just misfortune, coincidence, or the failings of others. Yet, if we look more deeply, we see the same invisible script, our own unhealed belief that we are unlovable, powerless, undeserving, writing the same story with different characters. The Buddha taught that when we cling to attachment, we become like a person grasping a burning ember with bare hands. Again and again, we are burned, yet we struggle to release it, because the pain feels more familiar than the emptiness of letting go. For Anaya, the night by the river marked the moment when she stopped blaming the flames and began to open her hand. The next morning, she returned to the village, not with the frantic hunger to be chosen, but with a quiet readiness to love without needing to possess. In time, she met a man whose presence felt different, unhurried, gentle, unthreatened by her past. And this time, when love came, it did not echo the old wounds. It arrived as a simple companionship that needed no drama to feel real. Those who knew her remarked that she seemed transformed, but she would only smile and say, "When I stopped asking why others abandoned me, I found the part of me that had abandoned herself." So let me ask you now, with all tenderness, what patterns have returned to you again and again, wearing new faces? Have you ever wondered why the same disappointment keeps circling back, as though some unseen magnet draws it to your doorstep? Perhaps it is not the world punishing you, but life gently showing you the place that still needs your compassion. Perhaps the repetition is not a curse, but an invitation to finally lay down the old story and become available to something truer. When karma softens, these patterns do not need to return because you no longer carry the vibration that summons them. Like a lock that no longer fits the key, the old cycles lose their power to enter your life. Imagine what freedom might bloom when the old script is no longer needed. What would it feel like to rise each day without scanning the horizon for the next disappointment? As Anaya learned by the river, the end of karma is not a thunderclap of revelation, but a quiet surrender, a willingness to see your own reflection without flinching. And when that seeing happens, when the old wounds are met with tenderness instead of blame, life changes its tune. What was once a relentless loop becomes a clear path forward. And it is here, in this spaciousness, that you begin to notice the fourth sign, the subtle, mysterious protection that seems to rise up around you, unbidden, as if the universe itself has decided to walk by your side. Sign 4. A mysterious protection arises in a quiet valley where the hills wore their green like a gentle shawl. There once lived a novice monk named Ravi, whose faith was sincere but whose mind was always tangled in questions. He would often wander into the elder monk's chambers, carrying his endless inquiries like a bundle of firewood, asking about karma, about suffering, about the way a soul could ever be free from sorrow. Most of all, he wondered how a person could trust that unseen forces were truly guiding them. One evening, as the sky melted into a tapestry of violet and gold, Ravi followed his teacher, Venerable Maitreya, on the winding trail up the mountain. They walked in silence for a long time, the only sound the brittle leaves crunching beneath their feet. Finally, unable to bear the hush any longer, Ravi blurted, "Master, how can I know that I am protected? How can I trust that the universe is not indifferent to my struggle?" Maitreya paused on the path and looked out over the valley below, the village rooftops glowing in the last rays of the sun. His gaze was so steady, so calm, that Ravi felt his own heartbeat slow in response. "When the heart still clings to the old stories," Maitreya said softly, "protection feels like a myth, like something you must earn by proving yourself worthy. But when the heart has become clear, when the knots of karma begin to loosen, you will see that grace does not need to be deserved. It only needs to be welcomed." Ravi frowned, uncomprehending, and the elder monk said no more. A few days later, an answer came, not through words but through experience. One dawn, Ravi set out before the first bell to gather wild herbs on the mountain slope. The morning air was cool and sweet, with the scent of damp earth. As he made his way along a narrow ledge, thinking of nothing in particular, a sudden gust of wind rose up from the ravine. It struck him so sharply that he lost his footing and fell to his knees in the dust. Heart racing, he scrambled to his feet, only then noticing that a heavy rock had tumbled down from the cliff above, landing exactly where he would have stood had the wind not blown him aside. He stood there trembling, the echo of the stone still reverberating in his chest. In that moment, he felt something strange, an intimacy with the world so complete that he knew he was being held, watched over, even loved. The wind that had felt so harsh a moment before had been, in truth, a gentle hand redirecting him away from harm. When he returned to the monastery, Maitreya did not ask what had happened. He only looked into Ravi's wide eyes and smiled the smallest smile, as if to say, "Now you understand." When karma still entangles us, we often feel that life conspires against us, that every misfortune is proof that we have been abandoned by the unseen. But as the old entanglements dissolve, a subtle shift begins to take root. You start to notice how often danger seems to step aside at the last instant, how opportunities drift into your life without effort, how the very obstacles you once dreaded seem to dissolve before you must face them. You may wonder if it is luck or coincidence, but in your heart you will recognize it as something more sacred, a quiet alignment between your spirit and the fabric of the world. Have you ever paused to consider how many near misses you have already survived? How many times life has guided you away from paths you were not meant to travel? Perhaps it was the job that fell through, only to reveal a more meaningful calling. Perhaps it was the friendship that ended, freeing you to grow into yourself. Perhaps it was the illness that taught you to cherish the fragile beauty of your days. When karma is active, these events feel like punishment, cruel tricks played by fate. But when karma clears, they begin to reveal their secret, the mercy hidden inside every detour. The Buddha once said, "Just as a mother protects her only child at the risk of her own life, so should one cultivate a boundless heart toward all beings." And perhaps when our own hearts begin to grow more boundless, life itself responds in kind, shielding us in ways we cannot measure, guiding us in directions we never planned. So I ask you gently, can you look back upon the landscapes of your life and see where you were protected, though you did not recognize it? Can you feel gratitude for the unseen currents that carried you past unseen dangers? When you can trust that protection is not something you must earn, but something that flows naturally from a mind at peace, then you are ready for the next unfolding. And that unfolding is a tender miracle in itself, when your own inner calm becomes so steady that even those around you cannot help but feel transformed in your presence. Sign 5. Others mirror your inner peace. Not far from the ancient city of Rejagar, in a monastery known more for its gardens than its grandeur, there lived an old gardener named Dhiren. He was neither a learned scholar nor a famous teacher, yet over the years his small patch of earth had become a place where countless hearts found rest. Each morning before the monks gathered for chanting, Dhiren could be seen kneeling in the loamy beds of jasmine and rose, his gnarled hands moving slowly among the blossoms. He never hurried, he never raised his voice, and though he spoke little, those who came near him often left feeling as if a burden they could not name had quietly slipped from their shoulders. One afternoon, as the sun cast its golden nets across the garden wall, a merchant arrived in a cloud of dust and complaint. His business was failing, his wife was ill, his mind was a restless hive of blame and fear. Seeing Dhiren tending a row of marigolds, the merchant strode over, hoping for a sympathetic ear. But when he opened his mouth to begin his tirade, he was startled to find no words would come. Dhiren merely looked up, his eyes soft as worn cloth, and inclined his head in a silent greeting. The merchant stood there, bewildered, the anger in his chest dissolving as though it had never been. After a long pause, he simply said, "I don't know why, but standing here, I feel as if everything will be all right." This is the quiet miracle that unfolds when karma has loosened its hold on your being. Where once your unhealed pain leaked into every encounter, coloring your words, shaping your judgments, pulling others into conflict, now there is an abiding calm that others can feel, even if they don't understand it. You no longer carry the hidden need to prove yourself or to win every argument, and without that need, your energy becomes something like clear water, transparent, nourishing, unthreatening. The Buddha often spoke of this presence as the natural radiance of a heart unburdened by craving and aversion. When the inner turmoil fades, even the most difficult people find it harder to cling to their anger in your company. Like a fire that cannot catch without fuel, their aggression sputters and goes out in the soft air of your acceptance. It is not that you must perform any special act or say any clever words. It is simply that your being has become congruent, free of the hidden hooks that once snagged every passing mood. Think for a moment. Have you noticed how your own state of mind shapes the behavior of those around you? When you feel anxious, everyone seems to hurry and grow impatient. When you feel resentful, you meet only closed faces. And yet on those rare days when you are truly at ease, the world seems to greet you with unexpected kindness. It is no accident. Energy speaks more loudly than words ever can. There is a saying in the old texts, "The wise person is like a cool lake where weary travelers may rest," not because he offers answers, but because his stillness refreshes. Dhiren never tried to be anyone's healer. He never claimed to possess secret knowledge, but in his steady tending of the earth, in his gentle way of meeting each moment without judgment, he had become the cool lake that others could not help but draw near to. So I wonder gently, as you listen to this story, what do people feel when they stand in your presence? Do they feel the need to defend themselves, or do they sense a space where nothing needs proving? Do they leave your company more troubled or more whole? Perhaps these questions are not meant to inspire guilt, but to offer you a mirror, one that shows you the beautiful possibility of becoming a refuge in a world so often driven by fear. When karma clears, you no longer have to strive to create this effect. It arises naturally, without pretense. You begin to see that peace is not something you impose upon the world. It is something you embody, and in your embodiment, others find permission to set down their own burdens, even if only for a moment. And in time, as this presence becomes your second nature, you discover another wonder, that all the things you once chased begin, almost shyly, to find their way to you of their own accord. Sign 6. Desire fades, yet life flows to you. Long ago, high in the Emerald Hills, where clouds wove themselves into the pines, there stood a solitary hermitage made of weathered wood and stone. In that hermitage lived an old mendicant named Tenzin, who had once been known across the kingdom for his fervent prayers and his relentless striving. In his youth, Tenzin believed that the only way to secure blessings was to pursue them with every ounce of devotion, to beseech the heavens until his voice grew hoarse. So he spent years carrying his begging bowl from village to village, never satisfied, always convinced that if he could just gather enough offerings, enough knowledge, enough merit, his emptiness would finally be filled. But no matter how much he collected, his heart remained hollow as a gourd, rattling with longing that would not be quieted. He fasted. He recited chants until dawn. He lit countless lamps in the shrines. Yet each morning he awoke with the same ache, the same question that trembled behind his eyelids. Why does the universe withhold its gifts from me? One evening, exhausted by the futility of his seeking, Tenzin climbed the narrow path behind the hermitage, where a small river traced its patient course through the rocks. He sat on the bank, his old begging bowl clutched in his hands like a plea he could not let go. The moon rose, and in its pale reflection on the water, he suddenly felt the absurdity of all his striving. He saw how he had tried to barter with existence, as if the sacred could be bought through effort alone. In a moment that felt both humiliating and strangely sweet, he lifted the bowl and flung it into the current. The sound of the clay striking water echoed in the hollow of his chest, and then for the first time, he did nothing. He simply watched the moon drift across the river's skin. At dawn, he returned to the hermitage empty-handed, unsure how he would eat, unsure of anything at all. Yet before the sun had fully risen, a traveler came up the path with a bundle of warm bread and a jar of honey. The traveler said he had felt an inexplicable pull to visit. Later that same day, a wealthy merchant arrived unannounced, placing a small purse of coins in Tenzin's palm, saying only, "I don't know why, but I feel this belongs with you." And so it was, day after day, food appearing when it was needed, shelter repaired before it decayed, help arriving without a summons. In time, those who heard the tale called it a miracle, but the old mendicant, whose name had once been Tenzin, would only smile and say, "It was not a miracle. It was the end of my grasping." You see, when karma still binds the heart, desire feels like a hunger that can never be fed. We believe that if only we strive harder, we will finally be worthy of receiving. We exhaust ourselves in pursuit of approval, of security, of recognition, never pausing to notice how the very act of chasing pushes the blessings further away. Like a bird startled by an outstretched hand, abundance flees when it senses our desperation. But when the old knots of karma begin to dissolve, desire loses its fever. It does not vanish completely. It simply softens into a quiet appreciation. You no longer clutch at life with anxious fingers. You no longer measure your worth by what you can gather. Instead, you sit by the river of existence, content to watch its flow, knowing that what is meant for you will find its way to your shore without coercion. Can you recall a time when you stopped striving, perhaps because you were too weary to continue, and suddenly, without any scheming, something beautiful arrived? Maybe it was a kindness you didn't expect, an opportunity you hadn't pursued, a friendship that unfolded without effort. In those moments, something deep within you was aligned, free of the old hunger that says, "I must have this, or I will not be complete." The Buddha taught, contentment is the greatest wealth. It is a truth as simple as it is profound. When you no longer burn with restless longing, life begins to offer itself without condition. You discover that abundance is not a prize you win. It is the natural state of a heart at peace. So I wonder, dear friend, what are you still chasing as though your life depends on it? What if you could set down the old cup, as Tenzin did, and trust that what you truly need cannot be withheld? What might flow to you if you stopped striving to be worthy? When you no longer grasp, when you no longer ache with the fear of scarcity, you enter a quiet paradox where the less you demand, the more life comes to meet you. And in that gentle fullness, you will find yourself prepared for the most tender of all signs, the moment when even your old wounds become sacred teachers rather than curses. Sign 7. Gratitude for past pain. In a village tucked between the golden fields and the long sweep of forest, there lived a man named Kamal, whose life had been shaped by a sorrow so deep it seemed it would never release its grip. As a boy, he had watched helplessly as illness took his mother from the small clay house where they lived. He spent years railing against that loss, believing that no measure of time or prayer could ever soften its edge. Each dawn, he rose with bitterness folded around his heart like an old unwashed cloth. He became a craftsman, skillful with his hands, but wary of love, wary of any happiness he could not control. To him, the world was an unkind teacher, and pain was its lesson, relentless, senseless, undeserved. Yet as the seasons passed, something subtle began to shift in Kamal, though he could not have named it. Perhaps it was the long afternoons spent carving simple bowls from the trunks of fallen trees. Perhaps it was the way the forest never asked anything of him, how it stood patient and unchanged through all his turmoil. Over time, the sharpness of his grief dulled to a heavy ache, and then, almost imperceptibly, the ache softened into something more curious, an ache that seemed to ask not for vengeance, but for understanding. One evening, when the first chill of winter crept through the shutters, Kamal set aside his tools and walked the familiar path to the edge of the forest. He carried with him a single candle, lit in honor of his mother's memory. He knelt at the foot of the old banyan tree, where she used to gather herbs, the same place he had often cursed the heavens for their cruelty. For a long time, he stared at the flame, feeling its small warmth on his face, feeling the way it flickered but did not go out. And then, in a voice so quiet it trembled, he whispered, "Because of your leaving, I learned how deep the heart can go. Because of that emptiness, I learned how to listen." The wind moved through the branches overhead, a hush that seemed almost like an answer. Kamal felt something unfasten inside him, something he had carried for so long that he had forgotten it was not truly part of him. In that moment, the loss did not feel like a punishment anymore. It felt like a doorway, one he had finally been willing to walk through. This is the final and most tender sign that karma has been cleared, when you can look back upon the pain that once seemed unbearable and feel not hatred or regret, but a quiet gratitude for the way it shaped your spirit. When karma is active, suffering feels senseless, a cruel hand pressing you to the ground. But as karma dissolves, you begin to see the hidden benevolence beneath each sorrow, the way it carved space in you for compassion, for patience, for the fierce clarity that no comfort ever could have taught. Have you ever noticed how the wounds you thought would destroy you became the very openings through which grace could enter? Perhaps it was the betrayal that taught you discernment, the illness that taught you to cherish your days, the loneliness that showed you how to befriend your own heart. We do not often choose these trials, nor would we wish them on another, yet when we have survived them, we cannot help but see that they were not merely accidents. They were the chisels that shaped our rough edges into something capable of holding light. The Buddha spoke of this transformation when he said, "As a lotus rises from the mud unsoiled, so the awakened heart rises from suffering unstained." To honor your pain does not mean you invite it again. It means you no longer resent its presence in your story. You can bow to what hurt you without allowing it to define you. You can touch the scar and feel not shame but reverence. So I ask you, with all the gentleness in my voice, can you look back upon the darkest hours of your life and see them as a kind of strange mercy? Are you willing to consider that without those trials, you might never have learned the quiet strength you carry today? What if your suffering was not a sign that you were cursed, but an invitation to discover the part of you that could not be broken? When you arrive at this understanding, you are no longer a prisoner of your past. You become its witness, its student, and finally its ally. What once pursued you ceases to chase you. What once defined you becomes simply a chapter, no longer the entire book. And in this tender acceptance, you step beyond karma into the realm of grace, a place where you do not say, "I earned this," but simply, "Thank you," even when you do not fully understand why. And so, dear friend, if you find yourself standing here, able to bow to your pain, able to bless the paths that broke you, know that this is the quiet triumph of a heart that has outgrown the need to suffer. In this way, you become free, not because you escaped your story, but because you learned to love it. So here we are, dear friend, at the quiet threshold where these 7 signs have gathered like lanterns to light your path. Perhaps as you listened, you recognized the tender truths hidden between the words, the way silence has slowly become a sanctuary instead of a sentence, how your old reflexes have softened into witnessing, how the patterns that once clung to you have loosened their hold. You may have noticed the strange protection that now seems to walk beside you, the way others mirror the ease you've cultivated in your own heart, the abundance that arrives when you stop reaching for it. And finally, the deepest alchemy of all, the gratitude rising in you for the very wounds you once thought would undo you. In the teachings of the Buddha, there is no triumph louder than the quiet certainty that you have come home to yourself. No celebration more complete than the steady warmth of a heart at peace. If these signs have begun to flicker in your life, even faintly, take a moment to honor how far you have come. Not with arrogance, but with reverence. You have walked through seasons of loss and longing. You have sat with questions that had no easy answers. You have risked letting go of the old identities that felt safer than the unknown. And in doing so, you have become someone who no longer needs to be pursued by karma's lessons, because you have learned to meet each moment with presence rather than resistance. I wonder, as you sit here now, can you feel the soft hush beneath your thoughts? The place that asks nothing of you except your willingness to be here, exactly as you are. That hush is the truest proof that you have begun to outgrow the loops of old suffering. You have stepped into grace, which is not a prize or a punishment, but simply the natural state of a soul no longer divided against itself. So walk gently into the days ahead. Guard your peace as you would a sacred flame. Sit often in the company of your own stillness. Notice when life feels effortless, when blessings arrive without being chased, and when the old pain comes to visit, because sometimes it will greet it with the respect you might offer an old teacher who once showed you how strong you could become. If these reflections have touched something in you, I invite you to take a moment now. Breathe, let your shoulders soften, and honor the quiet triumph of your own awakening. You are not behind. You are exactly where your spirit needs to be. If this story has brought you comfort or clarity, please consider subscribing to Quiet Wisdom. By joining our community, you'll receive more gentle teachings, timeless stories and reflections to guide your days with purpose and peace. Simply click the subscribe button below and tap the bell icon so you never miss a moment of this journey together. And if you feel called, I welcome you to share in the comments which sign spoke to your heart most deeply. What has your own path of release and rediscovery looked like? Until we meet again, may you walk lightly, may you love bravely, and may your inner silence grow so luminous that it brightens every place you enter. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, and most of all, thank you for daring to grow.